Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. We're an intimate enough group, so please interject or comment or ask questions at any point. I'm going to talk about how Drupal as a service can save us all. My name is Ben Melançon. I'm a worker and an owner at Agaric, a worker-owned web development cooperative founded in 2006. We have this nice big image to make these trips tax deductible because spreading knowledge might not count, but advertising does. Anyhow, I'm thrilled to be here in Minneapolis because I'm going to be moving here. I'm from Boston. So, we're all at this great camp. We're doing well. Drupal seems to be working out fine for us the way it is, so why do we need saving? What needs saving? Well, let's start with Drupal. Drupal has never done better. This is the first Drupal release with its own logo, Drupal 8. But it's and Drupal 8 has 4,105 people who contributed to its development so far, as counted in the issue queues. That's really pretty amazing, and by open source free software project standards, it's any software project is something really to be proud of. But there may be still some issues in Drupal. Drupal, especially in the areas where people make decisions and people who are best compensated, is a bit white. It's a tad male, better than open source as a whole, but much worse than software industry as a whole. And as in most things, those with opportunity, who have the most opportunity to take advantage of the opportunities that Drupal affords, are those, again, who had the most opportunity to start out with. And now, while there's a relative ton of money in Drupal compared to what it was in the past, and most free software projects, we still struggle to get enough money to the essential needs just in the software. There's so much we know that could be done better, and it's still volunteers shouldering huge burdens in the community. And then there's these larger issues of opening up opportunities in Drupal to all, and dollars could certainly help there. And there's not, it's not getting there. We're not focused as a community in even fixing the core problems in the software, and we're definitely not extending opportunity that we have to make a living to people who historically have not had as great an opportunity. And it's just painful to me because this is a career you can do. You don't need to jump through the hoops of going to college and all of that. And like myself, and I think a lot of other people who are making a living in Drupal, we've gone to college for some random other thing. We've had the opportunities, and then we dabbled around and ended up in this software career, which is fantastic. But like, how do we extend that opportunity to people who didn't have a whole other opportunity to throw away? But like, anyhow, so these are problems. Let's maybe turn away from Drupal and look at the rest of the world. Okay, maybe with global warming, inequality, zooming past disgraceful and straight into ludicrous, war, rising ethnic nationalism, stymieing of democracy, and much of the above leading to actual famine, people dying of hunger in 2017 is too much for one talk. Let's just go back to Drupal. Per our keynote, let's use our superpowers for good. And let's talk about saving ourselves, our community, to the extent possible within the scope of a software project. But of course, Drupal's problems are connected to the rest of the world's problems. Going back to Drupal being a bit too white. It's definitely in part a reflection of today's inequality, which itself stems from the fact that much of the wealth in the world comes from, where that wealth resides comes from massive historical crimes on a continent level scale, with continuing echoes and a disproportionate impact on people of color. And most of our diversity of people of color in Drupal, not I don't remember all, but like where we really have a lot more diversity, it comes from our international community, the fact that we are a global project now. And it's awesome, and this is a real and meaningful diversity. But our community members from poorer countries tend to be from the more well-off in those countries. And this just is another indication of the global tendency for those who are most privileged in a society to be able to find careers in open source free software. And despite my focus on wealth inequality, which in theory less affects women, because by and large people, women are born into rich families and poor families, but there's actually a really high relation in the sort of disproportionate impact of basically having opportunity on a higher wall for people from disadvantaged backgrounds and women. And it's unfortunately, I don't know of good research into open source software that covers this, because it's mostly just looking at there's a problem. But there is really good research in sort of other careers, especially entrepreneurship. Everyone's studying that. And what they're finding is the people who can become entrepreneurs are the people who have a safety net, who have somewhere to fall back on. And this is very much the point of Chris Rooney's talk, and I really encourage people to look it up and watch it. And I'll ask people to email me so I can send resources, because I haven't put up a resource page yet, but Whitewashed by Chris Rooney, and he talks very clearly about the need to give people a safety net. And I think that there's a lot of similarity to getting really involved in open source free software and starting your own business. It's taking some time out from something that would be more immediately remunerative, more immediately making of money for you, to take something that's a bit more of your passion, a bit more of out there, that really can provide incredible compounding returns over time. But if you're just not in a place to take that risk, you get locked out, and that's what we see in the lack of diversity. So, and then the Drupal diversity inclusion effort is very much focused on right now just making a baseline of treating people well when they get involved in the project, and that's really important also. But there's no question that actually putting resources into extending opportunity to people in Drupal and on a society-wide level, but sticking with our software project for now, or putting resources into making people feel more welcome in the community would indeed help. So now that we have a little bit of some things that we feel we can make some progress on, we'll a little firmer ground. We'll step back and look at some of our goals for humanity by way of a software project. And so we'll start with what we're already doing. We are helping people communicate with one another, and we'll communicate widely with one another. That we stay in control of our communication. We earn livings which give a degree of freedom. We put disadvantaged people first in opportunity. This is, getting more into aspiration. And we gain the most power possible over our own lives. Basic, go for everything. And we use the experience in collective action that any kind of these collective efforts entail to work for justice and liberty for all. Minor little goals. And where is Drupal for this? And so at the Drupal for Small Organizations and Nonprofits Birds of a Feather this morning, we sort of admitted to each other that Drupal is not currently a great option for under-resourced grassroots groups. Drupal is relatively more out of reach for people who really need the help in coordination it can provide than it ever has been. And that's unfortunate, because historically Drupal's done a lot. OpenMedia.org was one of my early clients. Steve Anderson started Open Media with no budget. I know this because I was doing the early work and wasn't getting paid or was getting paid almost nothing, and I eventually told him I couldn't, keep doing the work for free or for nearly nothing anymore. And he found some other people who did awesome stuff for him, still with Drupal, and they were involved in the internet fight back. Unfortunately, this is a current graphic. I'll get to that in a moment. I did not do the graphic design for any of this stuff. But it was the successful fight for net neutrality in 2015. And it was so successful that a company has been spun off with a Drupal-based service to provide the world's most advanced campaign engagement tools at a price causes can afford. And that is newmode.net. And again, all people who worked on it well after I put in my time and dropped off. But just using Drupal as a tool for organizing people, coordinating people, for getting things changed in a positive direction in this case. And so it's really important for the big net neutrality win in 2015, which is so important to our freedom to communicate instead of having the people who control the physical infrastructure of the internet to be just like, no, we don't think that traffic should reach its destination. Net neutrality, of course, is under extreme threat right now again, so please sign up with openmedia.org or freepress.net or any other organization that's working on this, and do get involved. Power is coordination. In every case, we need to gain power to make change. Knowledge is not power, said Mariam Kaba, aka Prison Culture, who is highly knowledgeable on the subject as a long-time organizer, focusing on ending violence, dismantling the prison industrial complex, practicing transformative justice, and supporting youth leadership development. It's whether it's power from below of people trying to organize for change, or power from above, like power is coordination. If someone says power is money, money is just the way that we can get people to coordinate. But if we coordinate on our own without the need for money to tell us what to do, we still have that same power. And I tend to fixate on injustices that are more or less caused by organized, unaccountable minority making decisions affecting a much larger and unorganized majority. But there are plenty of problems that have little or nothing to do with the problem of concentrated benefit and distributed cost, where those who stand to gain a lot don't mind pushing a much higher cost on a much larger number of people. They're just problems because we, as society, haven't gotten our act together. And traffic jams are my favorite example of this. They affect millions of people who, while mostly not in the top 1% of income or wealth, are easily in the top quintile. But I guess this is an out-of-date thing because self-driving cars will fix that. This is not a self-driving car. Well, it wasn't designed to be a self-driving car. This Jeep was remotely hacked through its steering, which was hooked up to the computer system, which was hooked up to the internet for the benefit of the media system. So Jeep has had to recall millions of vehicles because of this minor design flaw of hooking up the steering to the internet insecurely. But again, you'd think even capitalists interested only in their own enrichment would figure out solutions to problems like these. So do we really need to be seeking control of our own software and infrastructure to fix these sort of things? Probably. We recently celebrated the 30th anniversary of the first computer virus called Brain by two brothers in Lahore, Pakistan, who still do business as Brain Computer Services. In one version of the story, they were used to Unix and wrote it to show how they wrote the virus to show how shockingly bad the new Microsoft computer security was. In another version, they were attempting to track copyright theft, and one person can have multiple motivations, and with two of them, it's very possible both versions of the story are true. They did not have malicious intent. They put their address into the virus. And that wrote itself onto the boot sector of infected floppy disks. And the point is that horribly insecure things can become global standards. And the economic cost of computer viruses is estimated, wild estimate, but it's estimated 100 billion annually, and that was before some of this ransomware stuff. So, probably even worse. So just to finish that point, for the next one, just trigger warning on the next slide, but that we have, the point of, of democracy is that we're best to look after our own interests, and that's the same point for like economic democracy, having, and free software and having control over that, just having control over our own lives. We're going to be the best to look after that. And we already see in the world that maybe things are not being looked after in our best interests, sort of in the abstract, even when it does affect pretty powerful groups. And just moving on to a very specific case of affecting someone with very little power. This is Corin Gaines, who was quite paranoid that the local police in Maryland, Baltimore County Police in this case, would kill her. And she would make videos on Facebook Live and talk about this and tell her son to keep filming if something happened to her. And they go to serve a warrant on her for nothing very important. And it escalated into an armed standoff. She began recording video to Facebook Live, and the standoff. She's got some like large like not an assault rifle, just like a shotgun, something like that. But so it's a 7-hour standoff. She's on her porch, and the police are like rightly considering that the warrant probably isn't important enough to go through with this today. But 7 hours into the standoff, the police ask Facebook to turn off the Facebook and Instagram accounts. Just disable her ability to communicate directly with the world while she is talking about her fear of the police killing her. And then the police kill her. They shoot her dead and injure her 5-year-old son, while she is denied the right to communicate, basically, by Facebook based on a request, no warrant or anything, just a request from the police department. Just give a pause in memory, but so our relationship with technology and who controls it crossed a fatal line that day. So the obedience of a website, like what website? Well, we make websites. Facebook is still just a website. The obedience of a website to local law enforcement led to a woman's death. Pretty straightforward. And the power we are ceding to faceless corporations is not theoretical. And what are we going to do to take it back? And so what are we going to do to bring our software, our community, to the next level? So what leads to long-term success? New contributors with new ideas. People continue to join and pay to use at some point. We need resources flowing into our community, our software. This does require a low-cost, easy way for people to get started. And again, having new people means that we have new users that bring their needs and ideas. To stay vital, to build the next thing that matters to people, we need to be working for people. We need to be engaged in a larger community than just developers. And people need to feel they have meaningful control. Our relationship with our users is going to be much better with outside communities if they feel they have some meaningful control over the direction of what we build for them. And then, of course, people actually do have meaningful control is an important part of that. And that's where we are, our drift to the enterprise, while it may work out for us individually financially, is dangerous for the the future of the software and for the community to some extent, and my sort of extreme argument here is it's dangerous for the future of the world. Like, we need to be in the game in building software that is used by a large number of people, that we have a direct relationship, that they can shape the direction of the software to meet their needs. But Drupal is much more enterprise in feeling. It's no longer fun to just set up something for fun, and we still have that learning curve. And so, what can we do to break down the barriers for people getting started? How do we kick open the doors and let people in while still keeping the power and the coordinating power, the management system power that we have in Drupal? That we want to be able to take this enterprise level power and put it in service of people in the community. And that brings us to a long time problem that free software has had. Free software has largely been built by people employed full-time by large corporations that benefited from the security and stability of open source free software. And Drupal has been an exception. But we're sort of falling back into this funding model. So this is just, SAP, which is, I don't know how incredibly large that company is, saying like how well we work with Red Hat, like just a, free software and, decent company in its own right, but, not used to, anyhow. But it just shows the symbiosis with the enterprise. Like, huge companies are fine, and it works for them because they're looking for the stability. They're not looking for that last little edge. Whereas all of these cloud services that are increasingly important in our lives, like all the big platforms you can think of, are actually built almost on a full free software stack. Like all the really important things. Their servers are running Red Hat or Debian. They're using JavaScript libraries. They're using PHP or other open source programming languages. Like it's free software, like all the way up. The bigger ones are contributing a bit back because the developers, want to take part in the community still. But the last little bit is kept proprietary, and so they're making a ton of money off of that, and they're winning. And Dries Bortaert, the founder of Drupal, says the biggest reason the walled gardens are winning is because they have a superior user experience, fueled by data and technical capabilities not easily available to their competitors, including the open web. And it's that ability to capture money from end users or advertisers and put it into that last layer of usability that is sort of, even though we've got all of this free software, we have so much potential to build platforms that are truly controlled by the people. It's really being controlled by venture capitalists because they stick in the money that gives the user experience, that gets the advertising, that brings it in. So, a few things that doesn't change, though, is that we are the network. Like, we create, cause, bring into being the value on the network. That's what network effects are. And it's true that open platforms have the disadvantages to closed in making upfront investments. When one entity controls a platform, they can capture value more easily, so they can put more money into it and make that better user experience, get the word out. But open platforms have advantages over closed. More companies can try their ideas, more different needs can be served, the longer tail, and it sort of is a good space for like a hybrid situation where medium-sized companies actually will value something that is free software all the way through, because they may not be in a place to run it all themselves now, so they might want a service. But if you could provide the software as a service, and they know they can take it off, that can be a pretty good argument for a lot of businesses. So just the Libre SaaS or open SaaS value proposition is that we can your software as a service. So the same arguments that you make for software as a service, that the provider handles soft spikes in growth, that you can, but then what LibreSaaS further offers is that you can switch provider or self-host if your particular needs demand. And cost, the best of both worlds. Low startup cost with software as a service, and you always have the option of self-hosting, so you're not trapped into a per-user thing. And this is really relevant. Lots of the Drupal community has moved to Slack, which is a closed source product, and they have a per-user pricing model. That just doesn't scale for a community the size of Drupal. Like, there is no way with Slack's current pricing model that we can start paying for Slack and get the full histories and all of the things that the paid option has. If it were a free software thing, we could, a small thing could start with it and then move to self-hosting when it makes sense, or pick another provider that has a different pricing model. And then control and ownership. Same as a good software as a service, you're doing backups and security, but with LibreSaaS, you can take the code, you can take the data. You should always be able to export your data from any service. Lots of them don't let you do that, but free software as a service, you can actually take the code and run it yourself. And that's where that's happening a little bit in Drupal. Roomify does booking engines. Usually they're customizing it, but they have a simple SaaS. And it's all available on Drupal.org. OpenSocial is doing software as a service, and they're interested in coming back around to sort of, a lot of the dynamic ideas for Drupal that were done for Drupal is because people were building them for, a small grassroots group that was trying to do something. In this case, the company behind OpenSocial had built, which is called GoalGorilla, had built a sort of an intranet internal communications for a not so small nonprofit called Greenpeace, but they took all of the lessons they learned there, and in supporting, it was really successful for them, and they're turning it into something that is fully free software and that organizations can get hosted. And they have 550 communities on there with pretty soon after launch. It's still, they got a long way to go to profitability or to break even, but they are taking this LibreSaaS model and running with it. And so if we add one more layer to that, giving people even more control, giving people an ownership stake in the platforms running things, this is, I'm in a worker cooperative, but if we made a site that 1 million people were using, like our say shouldn't be the main say. The idea is that people should have the people who are most affected should have the most say, and when you are building a platform for hundreds of thousands of people, you as the workers are no longer the most affected. And so, there's been different kind of cooperatives for a long time. The current words coined for the idea of a software as a service or a large tech infrastructure being owned in common is a platform cooperative. So you think of platforms, anything that's bringing people together is often considered a platform, but obviously Facebook, Uber, Airbnb are some big platforms, eBay, and so there are more or less incipient platform cooperatives in a lot of sectors, and some are in pretty new sectors and actually owning it to some extent, or like they've found a niche. So there's a cooperative of mostly photographers and artists called Stocksy, where they've taken control of selling their stock art, and rather than that being just controlled by Getty or one of the other really huge platforms for that sort of thing. So there's a whole bunch. And so the Internet of Ownership.coop, IOO.coop, has them listed by the hundreds, and again, in various states of progress. But it's a real movement. It's getting a fair amount of attention. So the idea is to combine Drupal, cooperativism, and software as a service, and really make several projects that can bring money in from the end user, which is what we're missing in a large aggregated sense. We're all off building sites for one client at a time, and unless that client is large with a lot of resources, we can't do a lot to push the state of the art forward. So if we do a software as a service, and sort of the same way people will donate to a Kickstarter just because they want to see something in the world, launching one of these businesses, which GoalGorilla sort of did with Open Social, they did crowd investing, and quite successfully, and partly investing from people who wanted to use the technology. So people were buying ownership at the same time as funding something they want to see happen. But we know people will just throw money at something they want to see happen. And the idea is to perform, with the platform cooperative model, you can make a much stronger case that not only are you helping put money towards something you want to see happen, but you have a membership, you have an ownership stake in this, and an equal say with everyone else who's contributing to this project. And a few more things to do. I'm using Indie WebCamp as a placeholder, but the idea that we want to be working sort of at a protocol level, not just at a software level. That it's going to be much more powerful if we build something that isn't tied down to one piece of software. And Indie WebCamp is one of the groups really trying to figure out, okay, how do we just use simple protocols to make the experience of operating on the open web, everyone can have their own site, as compelling as the experience on the closed lockdown web, where you can comment and interact and follow and all of that stuff. So it's just one effort, but when we're putting more resources into building a bigger thing, to think in that longer term, what kind of protocols, what can we do to really move the power even out of the software and into just agreed ways of relating to one another, in this case mediated by technology. And to make sure that we do projects like this in the spirit of cooperativism, to ensure every success helps others levels up, build in ways that when one group gains more power with the solidarity of others, that group then uses its power to support others. And to use this opportunity of coordinating on a larger scale to seek out and socialize rents. So just examples of that are land is the classic one. People are getting money just because they own a piece of property. They're not contributing anything to it. They're just getting it. And modern capitalism is pretty good at sort of hiding this, but a large amount of the inequality of wealth is just due to the fact that things are structured so that people who have a lot of money can collect more without actually doing anything. And trying to figure out where those points are and socializing those flows of money is, I think, very important to do. And this idea has been around a very long time. Henry George is from 150 years ago. But there's this ongoing school of social science about his ideas, which I knew about his ideas, but I didn't know there were people still actively trying to implement them. And this is figuring out okay, so this is the part of the value you contributed to, and this is the value that's coming from the rest of society. We're going to tax the part that's coming from the rest of the society away. You don't get to keep that. But monopolies on so-called intellectual property is much closer to what we're dealing with. So brand identity, which can be attacked with culture jamming, and this proprietary layer on much of the software out there, which can be, if we can outcompete, can be replaced with free software. And then the biggest thing that we're targeting with platform cooperativism is network effects. The idea that the network effects of a huge number of the value that comes from people being connected. the classic example is the telephone. One telephone, very useless. 2 telephones, that's a bit more useful. When everyone has one, that's really powerful. But giving just one group the ability to figure out how to extract the value from that network is, it's admitted to be a bad thing. That's why there's anti-monopoly effects. And we just have new monopolies of networks now. And so if we can replace that with our own networks, we can figure out what to do with that value, whether we're just going to let, not try to extract it from people, or say that, well, this is really valuable, and now we can put more money into things that are important to us. So again, controlling your infrastructure, which can include communications, the material basis for survival, following the supply chains. But we're technologists, and at an event at a worker cooperative conference, again, these are workers, so these are technology workers, so a bunch of web developers are talking about building technology platforms and like how we're going to serve people. Ed Whitfield of the Fund for Democratic Communities said, this sounds like a discussion about building a marketplace where the discussion is organized by the people who make the tables. And that's why the most important principle is that we need to practice a democracy if we're going to organize a software project and platform cooperatives, democratically, which a cooperative has to be. But even just in our free software projects and our software projects is to practice what we do such that we put the people who are most affected first, that we center the people who are most affected. And then a lesson from the labor movement to build institutions at world-changing scale. That it was unionization, mass levels of people in unions that gave rise to a middle class in the US and in many other parts of the world, and that we need to be building things at scale to affect things at that level. And so Utopia is going to solve all that, do all that, and that's all. So any questions? So Utopia.org, please do just sign up there. We're sending out things very occasionally, but this is an active effort in Drupal and Drupal 8 to try to tie together a huge number of these themes. It grew out of just the people who did the distributions for small grassroots groups in Drupal 7. Open Outreach, Chocolate Lily, Rosemary Mann, and Nedra Rogers. And then Open Aid was another distribution in Drupal 7 that Atten Design Group did a lot of work on. Clayton Dewey was involved in that. So those 3 people are part of the core of the Utopia initiative. They're like, okay, we're in Drupal 8. What can we do better? But they never made a lot of money with building a distribution. Atten probably benefited a little bit from the marketing around Open Aid, but mostly you put a ton of effort into building a distribution. So now people who cannot afford to hire a web developer for customization can download it and get started. But you are a web developer who makes their money by customizing things. So it's a complete mismatch in business model, and this is what's been, what's plagued in Drupal. It's like you either follow your way into the enterprise where one client can pay for, serious more development, or you just make a little bit of money just doing one site at a time for someone. But putting the extra effort into really tying it together into coherent software that really nails that user experience, that adds new features that grassroots groups need, and there's tons of work that can be done. But as long as you're doing it for one under-resourced organization that can't even pay for the basic work, you're never going to build that. So the theory is that by aggregating a huge number of needs and by doing it as a software as a service, because people are already used to aggregating their needs that way, trying to just go around to people and say, look, can you just get on the same page? That doesn't work. But to list out, this is our vision, and this is what we're going to build. Do you want to sign on to it? Yeah, that has been proven to work in non-free software tech startups. And so that's sort of the model we're following. But again, centering the people who are most disadvantaged, most affected, most are in need of the power to coordinate. So the plan. Build a websites as a service platform providing sites for grassroots groups and nonprofits. Using the revenue to build the best platform for grassroots groups, activists, organizers, and movements, including communication and relationship management tools, and really getting into that space. And use that revenue and membership. And this is where the idea gets a little more challenging, because we are intentionally trying to build this for people who have the least money to put into it. But use the revenue, large number of small amounts of money do add up. Use that revenue and membership to build the most powerful communication network in the world under democratic control. And use this rabbit for inspiration. Do not be afraid of a large and daunting task. Just bite off one leaf and chew it up, and you'll get to all of them eventually. And these are a number of the resources mentioned, and I will at least post a link on Agaric to Chris Rooney's blog post. He hasn't written a blog post yet. Chris Rooney's session on whitewashing, and again, that's definitely a goal that Utopia is bringing in. Is as soon as we have any resources, how do we make sure to center people who who don't have the opportunity we have to put in at least 15, 20 hours a week on trying to start this from nothing. So to try to diversify our leadership team as quickly as possible, and the people who are ultimately get compensated for building the software as soon as any of us are compensated. So yeah, questions?
Do you have any plans on trying to go into like the high schools and stuff to recruit interested people? Because that's where they're making the decisions on what to take and what not to take, and
yeah. So yeah, that is a huge piece that I don't feel I tied together very well. When I was talking about like how Drupal is a lot harder to get started with than it sort of used to be. It used to be if you say I do websites, and someone would hire you, and that's malpractice now. Like you shouldn't be building a website for someone in Drupal or anything else, like totally on your own. I'm in awe and amazed at the people who do it, and there are people who can pull it off, but it's still, you become like the single point of failure. And so, it's professional malpractice at this point to build a website for someone. But like, if you're just getting started, how do you do it? Your option is to like build the website for someone on Squarespace, or something like that. We don't have free software in the game that like we need to, and so that was the real point, is that we are killing off like the source of future innovation unless we get there. And yeah, this is a long-running problem in schools, because like, schools could pretty much have, again, this is a problem of coordination, but it goes well beyond web software. Schools pay for Microsoft or Apple products, or they get given to them, or now Google is in it. But what people use reinforces what they use professionally, and so if there had been a societal commitment to like, no, you're going to get people started on free software in all of these schools, like the number of people who would learn it, the number of contributors that would have been involved, like it would have pushed like LibreOffice past Microsoft Word in some ways. But that's not happening, and doing it piecemeal is really hard. So just to the question of encouraging students to get involved, that's a major goal, is to have a software as a service where it's like, if you're just trying to learn HTML and CSS, guess what? It's Drupal 8. You have full control of the templating layer. You can make your own HTML and CSS, still have access to this full, powerful back-end CMS, but you don't have to know anything about that yet. You can get started with configuring and then you can add in the HTML and the CSS, and then, if you continue to progress like that, it's already a lot, and just people knowing how to manage a content management system, like just as a content editor, is still an important skill. And yes, so in short, yes, we don't have any immediate defined plans, but that the goal of getting a software as a service into the Drupal ecosystem absolutely opens up a huge opportunity to get people who currently would be pulled into a proprietary path that they have no control over into a path where they're like, oh, well, now I need to do more than this platform can do. And I just press the button, and now I have Drupal on my own system, and I can learn programming, I can hire someone, whatever, I can do it. Or I can create my own software as a service that is targeting a different group. So there's a distribution for restaurants, and that's for me, that's always been the ideal web developer job, is to do a service for restaurants, like your market research is going out to eat. So I highly encourage, as a group that has a bit more money, that market research is almost as fun as hanging out with radical organizers, is to look into doing the restaurants distribution software as a service. And if you can bring a few resources, that it would certainly help, because there's huge layers of infrastructure we have to build for this. We want to give people access to staging sites, like just built in. Like, no, really, the correct way to do this is to be able to test out your configuration, test out your design on a staging site, and then press the button, move there. But without you having to learn everything there. Like, you should be able to get started in Drupal without learning Composer. You can't really do that properly in Drupal 8 now. So the idea is to give people a really proper path to learning web development in like this, that can land you a job with enterprise, because yeah, Drupal's doing quite well there, without having to start out as an intern at some large company. That you can just build the website for your school, you can build the website for that business down the street in a way that's cost effective. Yeah. But for Utopia, it's more like that not-for-profit organization, that community group down the street, because that's what the tools will be built around. But the whole concept is the idea that this can be done in different verticals, and the tools tweaked for it, and that we're sharing the free software infrastructure of how we do these deployments, and that we're sharing a lot of the features, because a lot of the needs for small sites and a lot of needs for large sites are similar. I mean, that's what Drupal's doing decently at that. It's just that the money is coming from large organizations, so the needs of smaller ones are not being met. Sorry. Any other questions? A little bit too much on fire this time and just talk too fast. But I always have more to say, so it's a threat. If you don't have a question, I'll come up with something pretty quickly. So just talk about where we are with the Utopia project. It's we're still trying to figure out like the governance type of things. So it's like, okay, we want to have thousands. We want to have, we'll stick with thousands. Millions a bit ambitious of organizations of using it, and what level of democratic control. How do you operate a democracy that means something? Like, do you really have more control over the platform when you're one member of 100,000? And that, sort of gets ahead to the stuff that I really want to build is like, well, if you can talk to the other 100,000 people in the network, then yes, because ultimately whoever's in control of the communication is really in control of the process. And so a lot of the goal here is to figure out how to democratize communication. And I mean, I think that the only way to do that is actually to just share the work of making the decision of what should be distributed. So, I mean, I feel that this grows in parallel with platform cooperatives and any large-scale cooperative, and we've needed in our democracy since the internet existed, and we just haven't built it yet. but that, again, you have 100,000 people in the network. I feel that that we really need as an organization to, add a feature that, or just as a network, make sure that we're not susceptible to user data being subpoenaed by the government, and that we need to have a way to do that. And I mean, as a member of this larger group that's working on software, I feel that's very important. And I'm not someone who has the ability to step forward and just code it, which is the normal answer in a free software community. It's like, well, just step and code it. No, the whole point is to democratize the control beyond that. But if I feel that and I can't communicate it to the rest of everyone else, like it's the same situation we have right now, where there's all these different groups. So I mean, we're going to obviously build tools that help aggregate needs, that help people feel the sense of ownership, come forward with what they need, but still, ultimately, if people are going to be democratically controlling something, they need to be able to communicate with each other. So as that organization, as that member, I put forth this idea. I say everyone needs to know about this, and needs to at least be aware of this need, even if it's not a formal proposal at this time. And instead of having like the Utopia leadership team say, oh yeah, I think that's something that everyone in this organization should know about, it should just go to a random 20 people drawn from the broader membership to say like, oh yeah, I think this is important enough for the whole membership to know about, and that we should just share that work, and that's the only way to do things democratically. It's basically polling, which I'm not really in favor of, but I don't see any other way to have hundreds of thousands, millions of people in communication with each other without ceding control over that communication to some group, whether self-selected or appointed or even democratically elected. Like, this is control of the communication. This is fundamental. This needs to stay with the body with the network itself. So that's a sort of a key hack to communication tools that to build along with this. And again, that extends well beyond this particular platform. It's any large group that wants to operate democratically. So yeah, democratically moderated mass communication is just going to be one of the things that comes along for the ride in this, which I feel is one of the most important things to get out there. But this is the community I'm in, and this is where we're going to build it. Oh, but yeah, sorry, I was starting to say that we're still trying to figure out the governance, and so at least being able to communicate in a huge have a real way, a real fair chance at least for membership in this huge community to be heard. Again, this is a theoretical huge community. We got nobody yet. We have like 5 people who've signed on to try out the prototypes. Not that we've asked a lot, but one of those is the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee. So, we're working with people most disempowered in the society. These are people literally in prison and legally slaves, basically, because that was the exception in the 13th Amendment that outlawed slavery. No, if you're convicted of a crime, of course we can make you work for nothing, or 20 cents a day or whatever that joke is. But so yeah, people working in prisons to strike for decent food and living conditions and basic human rights in prison where they're denied in the United States. So that's a really awesome group to be working with, and a lot of interesting needs coming out of that. And so yeah, we're sort of just in that's the phase we're at. We're really in the prototyping phase. The phase we have to move into is basically the marketing phase. It's like signing people up before we've built everything, but projecting our values much more clearly than I've been able to do so today, sorry. And that's one of the problems. I'm sort of the person who's the marketing has currently going to fall to, and that's not going to work well. I talk about the thing I'm most passionate about, and it's sort of like, a friend of mine talks about new hubcaps on his car, and it's actually genuinely the most exciting thing you've ever heard. So I got to get myself out of this position, but I feel really responsible as someone who has followed the lean startup approach. Had one failed startup where I know we didn't do this enough, iterate enough, but we didn't get the where we built too much and developed, got users too little, really tested concepts against people. So, because this is only going to work if we can communicate to organizations the value. And so we start with communicating the value, and because we know we can build it. Yes.
I'm curious. So you're talking about lean startup. So that's a technology methodology.
Yeah.
There's obviously a ton here that refers back to worker-owned co-ops and revolutionary organizing methods and stuff like that. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about maybe some of the stuff you've looked into that you're modeling yourself after, or people who have done sort of things that you're cribbing from.
We're sort of still in, so back to governance, we're still governance and some other things. We're still in the research phase. Definitely, looking at the best of the labor movement in that you are building a mass organization, you are attacking a very material immediate need, but when the labor movement has been successful, it's had a grander vision for society and communicated it really well. So that's definitely one incredibly huge, rich historical narrative that we're really aware of. And there's been pretty amazing interplay between worker co-ops and consumer co-ops in the labor movement. The Knights of Labor in the 1880s and 1890s were, in today's terminology, an anti-racist organization. At this time, they organized across racial lines at a time when this is unbelievable, and they formed cooperatives. And they were ultimately crushed by state power and the railroad monopolies, all of that, which is why you don't know as much about them today. But it was a really huge mass movement and really, really amazing in the values it was communicating. So cooperatives, labor movement, So Clayton Dewey is doing a lot of looking at this right now. I've been looking at sociocracy, which has been around for a while, and holacracy is its more corporatized cousin. Just as something that people have been practicing for a while and have some idea of how do we devolve power, how do we bring input in a good way. But we're definitely looking at and looking to learn a huge amount from the grassroots groups, the people doing organizing today with whatever tools they have, and doing incredible work and building mass or not so mass organizations, but that are really accountable to the people they're serving. So that's where we're looking for inspiration, how do we bring those lessons into our project other than listening to the people most affected? I don't have any easy answers right now, but that's definitely where we're looking. And knowing that some of the organizations that are going to be able to afford us first before we've been able to bring our price point down are not going to be the best organizations necessarily at this. They're going to be the ones that are, having more of a sense of ownership of their supporters rather than feeling that they are serving their supporters, I guess. And so I guess seeing the issues of having someone who starts an effort, a small group of people, and seeing the process where people are either co-opted or burned out, and seeing, you know, the rarer groups that have managed to more or less avoid that is very much on our minds. And so I think that's, you know, figuring out the, you know, some practical way to do democratic decision making is why that's really important to us, because you need to be able to refresh the leadership. And so that's something more that we've learned from this, you know, from being around and watching all these great groups rise or fall or not. It's something we've just learned and aware of. But that, you know, we have, you know, there's lots of active groups that are also aware of this issue that are honestly going to be looking to us to help them solve. And that's really exciting because we'll learn from it at the same time. So the problem of continuity, especially in small organizations. And, you know, again, the organizations that grow large frequently become much less effective. Like when an organization starts, it is usually more radical than, you know, the public at large, or even, you know, the people it's serving. So, you know, the incarcerated workers organizing committee, these people who are in jail, they are way more, you know, connected to, you know, ideas and feelings for the needs of how things can change than even the average person who's incarcerated and has plenty of reasons to be thinking about how the system might maybe be better somehow. But then, you know, an environmental movement, like people who are really radically, you know, ahead of their time in thinking about how can we make, you know, how can we not destroy the planet? How can we not destroy our health and our local communities? Well ahead of their communities. They're the people who founded the organizations. And in some ways you can say, like, the big national environmental organizations, you'd want to think they're still ahead in some ways than the regular person, but in a lot of ways they're much more conservative. They're concerned about, you know, not alienating their, you know, large membership. They're concerned about not, you know, angering partners in government and corporations, because it's like, the environmental movement made some incredible accomplishments from, like, hardly existing to, you know, coming into being in the 60s and 70s and, you know, literally, like, healing a hole in the ozone layer. Like, these are pretty amazing victories, and, like, getting tons of land protected. And now with the largest, you know, threat to, like, you know, species survival ever for this planet, we're, like, surpassing, you know, anything it's seen. These quite large, powerful environmental organizations relative to where they were 30 years ago in size and power are hardly on the scene. And honestly, if they were more responsive to their membership and not to the needs of the leadership to feel that they have institutional stability, I think we'd be seeing so much more of it. So anyhow, I mean, that's a roundabout way of saying that, yeah, we're really looking at all of these groups that have tried to do good things, the smaller groups and various size groups that are actively doing it, and figuring out, you know, how do we do democratic accountability in a way, and while still, you know, prioritizing, you know, a real, truly inclusive leadership, and seeing, you know, yeah, who we can model after and how we can help these groups provide continuity in their groups, and how that we can do the same thing in ours. And a lot of that has to do with empowering, like, the base, the membership of groups to be more active in the decision making and the ultimate, like, control in these groups. So, which, you know, plays very well into how we all get more control over how society as a whole operates. So we need to figure this out anyhow. Thank you.